The death of Sir Lester Brian Bird, my surrogate father, Mr. Speaker, for the last 35 years, feels like a stab wound in my heart, Mr. Speaker, because, Mr. Speaker, he was the architect and driving force of my political life in national service. And so I weep for him whose nation-building accomplishments are lights and echoes to the eternity of Antigua and Barbuda. In his honor, Mr. Speaker, and loving memory, I paraphrase the timeless words of Rudyard Kipling, and I quote, "He kept his head when all about him were losing tears and blaming it on him. He trusted himself when others doubted him, but made allowance for their doubting too. He didn't deal in lies. He didn't give way to hating. His dreams were not his master. His thoughts were not his aim. He met with triumph and disaster and treated them just the same. He was able to hear the truth he spoke, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. He talked with crowds and kept his virtue. He walked with kings, but he never lost the common touch, Mr. Speaker. He filled the unforgiven minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. His was the earth and everything that's in. He was a man." Mr. Speaker, on behalf of my late father, Patrick A. Michael, my dear mother, who just had surgery and will be returning tomorrow to attend the funeral, Joseph Michael, my sisters, Teresa and Saraya, my son, and the entire Michael family, Mr. Speaker, I extend the condolences again to Lady Patricia Bird, his children, the elders, Danielle, Rika, Kieran, Jan, all of who I grew up with as kids, as my sisters, his daughter Sabina, Reina, and his two sons, Bryant and Lorenzo, other members of the Bird family, especially Ivor Bird, and all those who feel his passing in a special way, Mr. Speaker. We hope and pray that the loving memories of the life and times of our nation's second Prime Minister, in building the best Antigua and Barbuda for all its sons and daughters, bring you peace, joy, comfort, and strength. Lady Patricia. We weep for the loss of our dear friend and honorary member of the Michael family for nearly 50 years. His death brings tears for the pieces of his caring heart and brilliant mind. He had such a brilliant mind, Mr. Speaker. Generously, he granted us that mind through the years that have blessed us beyond measure. And we are indeed, and especially myself, lucky, sir, to have shared so intimately in the life and times of such a wonderful human being. Indeed, there's comfort in knowing that while we mourn his loss among us mortals, that the immortals rejoice to meet him in the great beyond. For Sir, Mr. Speaker, Sir Lester, which you knew, sir, was part of our family ever since my late father, Patrick Michael, retained his services. For easy $250 back in those days, you know, you lawyers didn't charge much back then. Shortly after his return from law school at Gray's Inn in London in 1971, my dad was the first to retain him in this country. Before that, Sir Lester graduated from the University of Michigan, which we all know he studied political science and psychology. And that is why he understands human behavior so much. He was so psychological, so caring. And he was also a social worker in New York for a few years, counseling traumatized Jews and victimized and downtrodden and less fortunate black people in America. And those were the days of the civil rights movement when Sir Lester himself, because he told me these stories, he was a victim of racism in the US. He marched with Martin Luther King across the Brooklyn Bridge. Many people do not know that. He told me this as a young boy. And he participated in the protest movement of Malcolm X. He suffered the scourge of racial prejudice when he was a student. But, Mr. Speaker, he never gave into it as he committed himself to be a responsible citizen of the one and only human race. Lester Bird was in America when Malcolm X was shot. His girlfriend then, the first girlfriend, was Joycelyn Walter. Many people in this country will not know that. That was George Walter's sister. Am I correct, Mr. Speaker? Joycelyn? My father was instrumental in securing Sir Leicester's first of 8 victories, I know I only have 10 minutes, in St. John's Wood East, and to defeat you, Mr. Speaker, in 1976, you would recall that, and to return the Antigua Labour Party to power in 1976. For 5 decades, he shared his remarkable life with my family. From his chambers, his law chambers on Redcliffe Street, Lester Bird would walk across to our family business on High Street every single afternoon after work between 1971 and 1976 to sit in my father's office to talk politics with the late Time Kendall, Ron Henry, Cosmas Phillips, and of course, Hugh Marshall, who is alive. Robin Yearwood was there too, and to relax every afternoon. Indeed, he spent every Christmas Eve and every Juve morning at our High Street store for over 40 years. He was a regular at our Dry Hill home. Everybody in Antigua knows that. They accused him of having his kitchen cabinet at Dry Hill, where he saw there as a place of refuge, a place of relaxation, of retreat, talking, teaching, sharing his knowledge of world history, counseling, eating good food, drinking, even playing pool, games, relaxing, enjoying life. He inspired us, looked out for us, and delighted us. Mr. Speaker, we loved him beyond words. We missed him beyond measure. He was loved. I remember every Friday evening with Sir Robin, just sitting, talking, eating, relaxing, watching television with Sir Lester. It was a staple. But he was truly an iconic Caribbean politician and national leader who climbed the ladders of service to humanity as an exemplary people person, a walking encyclopedia, a lawyer, an outstanding fast bowler. I mean, I cannot say all I can in 10 minutes. He was an outstanding fast bowler, not just in Antigua, sir, but in the Leeward Islands, a footballer. Tim Hector told me he used to hold his football boots from Otters to the recreation grounds and back. He was so proud of Sir Lester as a football player. Tim Hector told me that. And we all knew about his track athletics when he won that bronze medal in long jump at the Pan American Games in the United States in 1959. And he was a national and regional sports administrator. Many people in this country do not know that it was Sir Lester and the late Tim Hector who saw in Sir Vivian Richards that raw talent and advocated for Sir Vivian Richards to be selected to the West Indies team. The AG is nodding. You probably know about it. But this beloved national hero stood so tall to be counted in the cause of nation building at a time when this nation was in strife of political turmoil and confused development direction under the PLM. For under the progressive labor movement, under George Walter, Donald Halstead, and others, wrong was at the wheel, freedom was in tears, and justice was fast asleep in this country. And the nation yearned for strong, insightful minds, caring hearts, from faith and working hands, fit for the noble person and purpose of public service in this country. And in the company of the young brigade of the Antigua Labour Party, men, the late Sir Adolphus Freeland, John E. St. Luce, Hugh Marshall Sr., Reuben Harris, Cosmas Phillips, and Robin Yearwood, Sir Lester answered the call. And after entering Parliament as the leader of the opposition, after he lost his seat in Barbuda and you all stoned him, he became the leader of the opposition in the Senate in 1971. And this legendary 6'4" intellectual giant, he spent 28 years in government from 1976, first as Deputy Prime Minister and then as Prime Minister from 1994 to 2004. As we know, he's the founding leader and first chairman of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States and widely regarded by his peers as a trailblazer in economic development and one of the most influential leaders of the Caribbean community, CARICOM. He was respected, Mr. Speaker. And under his chairmanship, CARICOM created the Caribbean Regional Negotiating Machinery, now the Office of Trade Negotiations today. But Mr. Speaker, Sir Lester Bird's leadership legacy is encapsulated in the spirit of a most faithful national servant and the quintessential Caribbean man. He was one of the greatest orators, as we know, When he rose to speak at the United Nations, every single Antiguan felt proud, the pride and joy. When Lester gave that speech in 1981 when we attained political independence, was one of the greatest speeches he ever delivered. He was one of the finest orators. He delivered a speech in Delhi, India, and Margaret Thatcher looked next to our Prime Minister and she said, "Where is that silver-tongued Deputy Prime Minister from?" What a great orator. Every Antiguan felt proud. For the duration of the interaction, Mr. Speaker, of more than 25 years that I have had, there was never one single moment when his patriotic spirit, his deep love, his commitment for Antigua and Barbuda, this country, did not shine with characteristic brilliance. He was so humble. He had power. His father was the Premier, Chief Minister, Prime Minister. He was Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Tourism, Economic Development, Foreign Affairs, Energy. But he understood humanity and he understood humility. Sir Lester was a visionary. He constantly saw and articulated the next level of advancement for this country and dutifully exercised the talent and skill, bringing vision to fruition to this country. As other speakers said this morning, Mr. Speaker, the modernization of this country, the Prime Minister said it, and others, the development of the national economy during the period of 1976 to 2004, when the country moved from 47% unemployment to near full employment, bears witness to the transformation of Lester Bird's vision into the real social, economic benefits for our twin island nation. It was his pioneering work in building out the infrastructure and human resource base for the hospitality services, the tourism services, marketing this country as a world-class vacation destination. He expanded air-access, attracting foreign direct investment inflows that piloted Antigua and Barbuda's tourism product to a lucrative
The time has
position.
expired, Honorable Member.
Yes, can I have 2 more minutes, sir? And I'll wrap up, please.
We have been giving everybody an extra 2 or 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. It is so, much that I have to say, but I can't. Lester Bird
Yeah, but don't
was a
forget,
charismatic
we read the book.
and magnetic personality. His leadership action in government expanded the social infrastructure. But he had charm, Mr. Speaker. He had class. He had presence, as the member for Barbuda said. And he loved this country. It was all about jobs, jobs. I remember the conversations of trial, the abolition of personal income tax. You have to credit Sir Lester Bird for that. For he discharged his responsibility for built the Mount St. John. I remember the education levy. I remember all of the marches, the 8,000 people that the opposition put on the streets. Lester Bird went through a lot, but Lester Bird understood. He understood that he in the exercise that he brought people into the fold. Sir Selwyn Walter. He brought in and made Sir Selwyn Walter an economic advisor to him. He even embraced Tim Hector, the late Tim Hector. And he made Tim Hector his fiercest critic, an ambassador in the area of good governance. He even gave it Lester Bird, Sir Gerald. Let me just say this, and this is important. In terms of the authority over government of the people by the people, Sir Lester ensured effective arrangements in this country, let history record it, for free and fair elections. And it was under his watch, Mr. Speaker, that the electoral reform recommendations of international election observer missions were fully implemented in this country to ensure that we had the Electoral Commission, sir, an accurate, clean list of electors, voters' IDs, election campaign finance. He also set up, Mr. Speaker, the office of the Ombudsman.
Your 2 minutes are up.
Well, I just want to say
So
in
would
the end,
you round off, please?
yes, personally, Sir Lester was more than a comrade and leader. He was my mentor, sir. He was my friend. He was my motivating force. And no one spent more time with Sir Lester over the last 30 years than me. And at an early age, he saw me what I've not seen in myself. He gave me a lot of positions. And I appreciate what Lester Bird did for me. He was pivotal in my service as parliamentary representative and encouraging me to run for politics. I cherish the faith and confidence that he had in me to make me his chief of staff